This is a recipe of baklava, baked and with syrup. In order to make this baklava, you will need 4 eggs, 1 cup of Greek yogurt, 1 cup of oil, 8 cups of flour, 10 cups of sugar, a bowl of walnuts, 2 1/4 cup of butter, and a lot of patience in order to prepare the baklava. To prepare the pastry, it takes about 15 minutes. It takes 10 minutes to lay down the layers and 4 hours to bake. The syrup takes about 15 minutes. In the description box below, you will find tagged videos to see this recipe step by step. Enjoy!
In order to make the baklava, first put the flour in a bowl. And then you will make a hole in the middle of that flour. In this hole, you can place the eggs first. And after the eggs, you will place the yogurt. Last is the oil. You will mix up those ingredients and make sure you reach the outside of the flour when you're mixing. Mix this for 15 minutes until it's all together. Now put the dough on the table and work it with your hands, also hitting the dough onto the table so that it becomes elastic. Put the dough in a damp bowl, wet or humid, and then you're going to let the dough rest for 2 hours. After the 2 hours have passed, you're going to remove the dough from the bowl and cut it into 4 pieces. Take one of those pieces and begin to roll it on a surface covered in starch. Roll the dough to approximately this size, and then cut the dough like so, anywhere from 15 to 20 pieces. When you are rolling out the dough, the room should be 30 degrees Celsius or 85 degrees Fahrenheit, warm so that the dough can stretch. Here you can see we are taking 2 pieces. This is just to speed up the process. You can also do the same thing with just 1 piece. You're going to add some starch so it won't stick, and then you'll roll out these smaller pieces, making them pretty thin, as you can see here. Try to make these pieces each about this same size, and then you're going to stack them on top of each other with some starch in between. Continue doing this with the rest of the pieces of the dough. Try to keep them about the same dimension and just continue stacking them all on top of one another. Once you have all of the pieces of dough, you're going to keep them stacked, press them down with the heel of your hand, and roll them all together. Remember that this is only 1/4 of all of the dough that you've made, because we took 1 out of those 4 original pieces, so you'll have to do the same process you've just seen for all 4 pieces. And you're going to just continue to roll the dough until it's very thin. Do it many times over, and you're going to have to keep adding starch in order for it not to stick. Continue rolling, and you're going to keep doing this process until you cannot roll the dough any thinner, and try to get the dough to approximately the size that you see here. So you're going to roll out the dough once you stop rolling. And then you can take a cardboard cutout of the size of the pan that you'll be cooking in and cut out a piece of dough that's a little bit larger than the size of your pan. Remember to keep the scraps that are on the side here, and we'll use them later. Then you'll take your pan, make sure you have some melted butter, and you'll put the melted butter at the bottom of the pan to start. Then you can place your first layer of the dough. Make sure the butter is covering the entire bottom of the pan before you put your first layer. And this is just the first layer of our bakllava. We will do the same thing for all the layers afterwards, putting that melted butter again after the first layer and before the second. After the second layer, we're again going to put the melted butter and then also mix sugar with the crushed nuts. Mix those together nicely and then evenly distribute that over the previous layer. And you're going to use all the nuts here. Again, just make sure to cover the entire area evenly with the nut and sugar mixture. After the next layer, if there are any openings where you need some more dough, you can take the scraps that you have saved and kind of fill in those gaps. Again, before the next layer, the next and fourth layer, we will put just the melted butter. So between the first and second layers, we did butter. Between the second and third, we have the butter and the nut and sugar mixture. And then between the third and fourth, butter, melted butter again. On top of all of this, on top of that fourth layer, we will put the melted butter. Then we will top all of this off with our final layer of the phyllo dough. Now we will cut the bakllava in its traditional shape, starting by cutting it in a cross. So one cut halfway, and the other like so. Make sure that you cut fully through the end, down to the bottom of the dish, and also to the edges, as you see here. Otherwise, it will be really hard to cut once it's cooked. Then cut each of these rectangles on the diagonal. After that, your next cut is going to be parallel to that first cut you made. Again, make sure to go all the way to the edge and make a second cut parallel to those lines. Now you're going to cut parallel to the diagonal line. And a second cut parallel to that diagonal line. And a third in the corner. We will then follow this process for the rest of the baklava. Again, cutting 2 cuts perpendicular to those straight lines, and then cutting perpendicular to the diagonal. Continue to make sure that you cut all the way through to the edge. And again, we'll do the same thing through the whole baklava, and then you'll see the star start to emerge, which is the traditional shape. It works better with a round pan, but you can also do this with a rectangle or square pan, as you see here. Again, pour melted butter over the top after it has been cut, and then you will cook it at 150 degrees Celsius or 300 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 hours. We cook it slow so that the pieces of baklava do not stick together. Now we have our baklava, and next we will talk about the syrup. For the syrup, you will need 5 pounds of sugar or 2.25 kilos of sugar, and 750 grams of water or 3.17 cups of water. We also put some lemon juice and cloves so that the syrup doesn't get hard. Remember, when you put the syrup onto the baklava, both the syrup and the baklava should be hot, otherwise this step won't work. Pour the syrup evenly over top of your baklava, and then wait 3 to 4 hours for the syrup to soak in. When you put the second round of syrup, make sure that the syrup is still hot and that the baklava has absorbed the prior syrup that you put on a few hours ago. It should just be sticky, but no longer liquid. And here is your baklava. We wish you a happy new year. Gzuar Vitaneri.